When is the last time you asked your financial advisor how they get paid? Not what their fee percentage is, and not what the expense ratios on your funds are. I'm talking about the full picture. Every dollar that flows from your account to them, their firm, the funds they use, and the platforms they operate on. Most people have never asked that question, and most advisors have never volunteered the answer. That's not an accident. The financial advisory industry is one of the most sophisticated marketing machines ever built. It spent decades cultivating a specific image, the trusted guide, the careful steward, the partner in your financial journey. And for many advisors, that image is genuine. There are excellent financial advisors doing excellent work for their clients every single day. But the structure of the industry, the way advisors are licensed, compensated, and regulated, creates a set of incentives that do not always point in the same directions as your best interests. And most investors have no idea those incentives exist because nobody's ever explained them to them. This video is not about finding a villain. Your advisor is probably not trying to hurt you. They're probably doing exactly what they were trained to do within the constraints of how the industry works. But understanding how the industry works, really understanding it, changes the questions you ask. And the questions you ask change the outcomes you get. There are 5 questions that most financial advisors cannot answer fully, honestly, or comfortably. Not because they're hiding something, but because the systems they operate within were not designed around those questions. Today, I'm going to walk you through all 5. And at the end, you'll have a completely different understanding of the relationship between you, your financial advisor, and your financial future. Let's get into it. My name is Adam Williams. I'm the founder and CEO of LFS Capital, a private equity firm based in Scottsdale, Arizona. I've spent over 20 years studying how capital works, how income is built, and how the traditional financial system operates. Last year alone, we completed over $200 million in multifamily transactions and added over 1,300 units to our portfolio. I've sat across the table from hundreds of high-income earners who were doing everything their financial advisor told them to do and still had a retirement plan with structural problems they had never been shown. This video is about why those problems exist and what to do about them. Let's start with how most people end up with a financial advisor. They get to a point in their career where they've accumulated enough wealth that managing it themselves feels overwhelming or risky. So a colleague will generally recommend somebody or a firm they can reach out to, or they'll walk into a bank branch and get connected to an advisor there. The conversation's usually professional, reassuring, and thorough. They leave feeling like their financial future is in good hands. What almost never happens in that initial conversation is a frank discussion of how the advisor is compensated, what the full cost of the relationship will be over time, and what the advisor is legally required to do on the client's behalf, and what falls outside of the scope that they're trained or motivated to address. Those conversations almost never happen, not because advisors are dishonest, but because the industry is not structured to require them. Now, here's the landscape as it actually exists. There are different types of financial advisors with different legal obligations to their clients. A fiduciary is legally required to act in their client's best interest at all times. A broker-dealer operates under a suitability standard, which means they're required to recommend investments that are suitable for their clients, not necessarily the best option available. Now, that distinction may sound minor, but it is not minor. It's the difference between someone who is legally required to put your interests first and someone who is legally required to not hurt you too badly. Most investors do not know which standard applies to their advisor. And even among fiduciaries, the compensation structure matters enormously. An advisor who earns a percentage of assets under management has a direct financial incentive to keep your assets in the account they manage. An advisor who earns commissions on products has a direct financial incentive to recommend products that pay higher commissions. An advisor who charges flat fees has a different incentive structure entirely. None of these structures are inherently corrupt, but all of them create incentives. And understanding those incentives is the foundation of understanding whether the advice you are receiving is truly aligned with your goals or not. Now let's look at the 5 questions. Here's what I want you to hold as we go through these 5 questions. You're not looking for a reason to fire your advisor. You're looking for a reason to have a better conversation with them. Or if that conversation reveals something important, a reason to restructure the relationship. The most expensive financial mistakes are not made by people who trusted the wrong person. They're made by people who never asked the right questions. So let's fix that for you right now. Question number 1, what is the total cost of the advice that I'm getting from you? This is the question that makes most advisors uncomfortable. Not because they're doing anything wrong, because the answer, when you add it all up, is often much larger than the client realizes. Here's how the math typically works. Most advisors who manage investment portfolios charge an assets under management fee, or AUM. The industry standard is somewhere between 0.5 and 1.5% a year. Let's just use 1% a year because it's the most common number you'll hear. 1% sounds small on a $500,000 portfolio. It's $5,000 per year. On a $1 million portfolio, it's $10,000 per year. And on a $2 million portfolio, it's $20,000 per year. But here's the number nobody shows you. That 1% is not just coming out of your balance, it's also coming out of your compounding, because the $20,000 you paid in fees this year is $20,000 that did not compound for the next 20 years. So let's run the actual math. Two investors, both start with $1 million at age 45. Both earn an average of 7% a year over 20 years. Investor A pays 1% in annual advisory fees. Investor B pays 0.1%, the approximate cost of a simple index fund. At age 65, Investor A has approximately $2.9 million. At age 65, Investor B has approximately $3.6 million. The difference is roughly $700,000 on a $1 million starting point, from a fee difference of 0.9%. That is the compounding cost of advice that most investors never see because it never shows up as a line item on your statement. It shows up as a balance that is lower than it should have been. And that is before you add the expense ratios on the fund inside the portfolio, which can add another 0.5 to 1% per year depending on what the advisor recommends for you. And before you consider whether the advisor's performance actually justified the fee. The total cost of financial advice, when calculated honestly and completely, is one of the most important numbers in your financial life. Most investors have never seen it. Question number 2, what happens to my income if the market drops 40% the year I decide to retire? Every financial advisor runs projections, Monte Carlo simulations, retirement income calculators, probability analysis. They show you charts with upward sloping lines and probability percentages. They tell you that based on historical returns, your plan has a 92% chance of success. But ask them what the 8% looks like. Specifically, ask what happens if the market drops 40% in the first 12 months of your retirement. Not as an abstract question, as a specific scenario with specific numbers. What's your projected portfolio value after that drop? What is your income in year 2? What is the long-term trajectory of the portfolio, given that you're now withdrawing from a significantly reduced base? This is the sequence of returns problem I've discussed in previous videos. It is the single most dangerous risk in retirement planning for people who depend on a portfolio withdrawal strategy. And it's almost never the centerpiece of the planning conversation. Most advisors will tell you that over the long run, markets recover. And that's true, but you're not investing over the long run anymore. You're retired and you're withdrawing. You're selling assets into a declining market to fund your life. And those shares do not recover for you once they're sold. See, a good advisor should be able to walk you through this specific bad scenario, not just the average scenario. If the answer you get is reassuring without being specific, you have not gotten an answer. You've gotten a posture. Question number 3, what's the tax plan for my retirement? Not just the investment plan. Investment management and tax strategy are different disciplines. Most financial advisors are only skilled at one and they're loosely familiar with the other. They will tell you that they work alongside your CPA or tax attorney, and that coordination is genuinely valuable, but coordination is different from actual strategy. A tax-aware retirement plan thinks about the character of income across the full timeline. So here are 4 questions to ask. Number 1, which accounts do you withdraw from first in retirement and why? Number 2, how do you manage Roth conversions during low income years to reduce future RMD exposure? Number 3, what is the tax treatment of every asset you own and how does it affect your net income in retirement? And number 4, what do your heirs inherit and what is the tax impact on them? These are the planning questions that live at the intersection of investment management and tax strategy. And most advisors operate on the investment management side of that intersection. The tax side is someone else's job. But here's the problem. If nobody owns the full picture, if your advisor is managing investments and your CPA is filling out returns and nobody's sitting at the table with both sets of information thinking about the long-term tax strategy, you have a gap. And that gap is where hundreds of thousands of dollars quietly disappear. So ask your advisor to walk you through the full tax life cycle of your retirement accounts. Not to file your taxes, but to explain what your tax picture looks like from now through the end of your life and into the hands of your heirs. If that conversation has never happened, it needs to happen. Question number 4, how are you compensated, and does that create any conflicts with my best interest? This is the question most people never ask, and it's the most important question on this list because the answer tells you everything about the incentive structure of the advice you're receiving. Here are the 3 most common compensation models and what each one means for you. AUM-based advisors earn a percentage of the assets that they manage. Their incentive is to keep the assets in accounts that they manage and to grow those assets over time. There's nothing inherently wrong with this model. When your assets grow, they earn more, so the interest is partially aligned. But it also means they have a financial incentive to keep your capital in the investment accounts rather than recommend you pay down debt, make a real estate investment, or move capital into a structure that they don't manage. Capital they do not manage does not guarantee them any fees. Now, commission-based advisors earn money when they sell you a product, like an annuity or a life insurance policy or a specific mutual fund. The product may be entirely appropriate for your situation, but the advisor also earns money when they recommend products with higher commissions, and that conflict is structural. It does not require bad intent to create a bad outcome. Now, fee-only advisors charge a flat fee or an hourly rate regardless of the products they recommend or how much they manage. This model removes most of the product-based conflicts. It does not remove all conflicts. An advisor who charges by the hour has an incentive to make things more complicated than they actually need to be, but it's generally the most conflict-free structure available. First, ask them directly, how are you compensated? Next, ask them, what do you earn if I follow your recommendation? And last, ask, is there any scenario where your compensation increases based on what I buy or where my money is held? A good advisor will answer those questions clearly and without defensiveness. If the answer is evasive or complicated, that's information too. Now let's get into question number 5. What is your plan for my legacy, not just my lifetime? Most retirement planning conversations stop at the investor's death. The advisor helps you build a portfolio, structure your withdrawals, and manage your income in retirement, and hopefully leave enough that you don't run out of money before you die. But the question is, what happens after that? The tax treatment of inherited accounts, the structure of the transfer, the impact on your heirs, the efficiency of the legacy that you leave is almost never part of the original planning conversation. But it should be, because the decisions you make today about how your capital is structured have a direct, significant impact on what your children or grandchildren actually receive. A traditional 401k passed on to a non-spouse beneficiary is a tax liability. Your heirs will pay ordinary income tax on every single dollar they receive on a 10-year distribution schedule that may land in their highest earning years. A $1.5 million 401k inheritance might net $900,000 after taxes, maybe less. Compare that to assets that transfer with a stepped up cost basis or structures that are already tax advantaged, or assets that generate income your heirs can receive without triggering a large immediate tax event. The difference between a well-structured legacy and a poorly structured one is not a small number. It can be hundreds of thousands of dollars or more in value that either reaches the people you love or goes to the government instead. So you need to ask your advisor these 3 questions. First, what does my estate look like from a tax perspective? Second, what do my heirs actually receive after taxes? And third, is there a more efficient way to structure what I'm currently building so that more of it reaches the people that I care about? If that conversation has never happened, you're missing a critical piece of your retirement plan. Let me show you what this looks like with 2 real investor profiles. Same age, same income, same starting balance, but 2 very different advisory relationships. Investor A has worked with the same advisor for 15 years. He trusts him, the relationship is comfortable. He's never really asked any of the 5 questions. His portfolio is well diversified across mutual funds with an average expense ratio of about 0.8%. His advisory fee is 1%. His total annual cost is roughly 1.8% of his portfolio per year. On his current $1.8 million balance, that's around $32,400 per year, leaving his account in fees, compounding against him year after year. In addition, he has no tax strategy beyond what his CPA handles at filing time. He's never had a conversation about what his wife will inherit or what his children will receive when he's gone. And he does not know what the bad scenario looks like. He just knows that the projected number at age 65 looks good on the charts. Now, investor B has asked the 5 questions 3 years ago. Not to be difficult, but because she's read something that made her cautious and decided to have an honest conversation. What she found was that her advisor was AUM based. Her funds had a higher expense ratio than necessary, and there were no tax strategy coordinated with her CPA. CPA. She made some changes. She moved to lower cost index funds inside her existing accounts. She started working with a fee-only advisor who coordinated directly with her CPA on a Roth conversion strategy. She asked about the legacy picture and restructured a portion of her capital accordingly. She did not overhaul everything. She just started asking better questions. And 3 years later, her drag is significantly lower. Her tax picture in retirement looks meaningfully different, and her heirs will inherit a substantially better structured set of assets. Same starting point, different questions, different outcomes. See, the 5 questions are not complicated, but they require somebody to ask them. So here's what I want you to sit with. A financial advisor who cannot answer these 5 questions is not necessarily a bad advisor. They may be an excellent investor operating within a system that was not designed around these questions. But you are not inside the system. You are the client, and the system's limitations are your problem, not your advisor's. The most empowered position you can be in as an investor is to understand the structure of the relationships you're in, the incentives, the gaps, the questions that are not being asked, and to fill those gaps yourself. Now, let me talk to you about what this actually looks like. The shift I want to offer you is not to fire your financial advisor. For many people, a good advisor is a genuinely valuable part of their financial life. The discipline of having someone manage your portfolio, keep you from panic selling, and coordinate the mechanical elements of your financial picture has real value that is hard to quantify. The shift is this: stop outsourcing your financial thinking entirely. There's a meaningful difference between delegating the execution of a financial plan and delegating the thinking behind it. Most investors delegate both. They hand over the capital and the decision-making simultaneously. And when you do that, you are entirely dependent on the quality, the integrity, and the incentive structure of the person you handed it to. The income engineering investor does something different. They stay engaged, not in the day-to-day mechanics. That's what the advisors are for, but in the strategic questions, the ones the advisor is not always positioned to ask. And here's what that looks like in practice. First, know your total cost, not the AUM percentage, the annual cost of every fee, every expense ratio, every platform charge. Calculate it in dollars, and then calculate what that number compounds to over 20 years. That number should be visible and it should be understood. Second, stress test your plan yourself. Ask your advisor to run the bad scenario, not the average scenario. What does my income look like if the market is down 40% in my first year of retirement? What does the portfolio trajectory look like over the following 10 years, given that I'm withdrawing from a reduced base? If you cannot get a specific answer, run the math yourself or find someone who will run it for you. Third, own the tax strategy. Do not assume your CPA and your advisor are coordinating on the long-term tax plan for your retirement. They probably are not. That coordination requires someone to initiate it and to own it. That someone is you. Schedule a joint conversation and ask the specific questions. What is the tax character of my income in retirement? When should I be doing Roth conversions? What does the RMD picture look like at age 73? And how do we manage it? And fourth, understand your compensation structure. Know what your advisor earns. Know if any of their recommendations are influenced by compensation. Know what they are legally required to do on your behalf and what falls outside of that obligation. And fifth, plan past your lifetime. Have an explicit conversation about what your heirs inherit, not the account balances, the after-tax values. What your children actually receive, whether the structure of your current capital is optimal for the transfer you intend to make. None of this requires you to become a financial expert. It requires you to ask the 5 questions and stay engaged with the answers. If this video changed the way you're thinking about your advisory relationship, if you're sitting there realizing there are questions you have never asked and answers you have never received, I want to invite you to have a real conversation. At Ellevest Capital, we work with accredited investors who are ready to engage seriously with how their capital is structured, what it is costing them, and what it is actually building toward. We answer the 5 questions directly every time, because we think that it's the baseline for any relationship worth having. The link to book a call with our team's in the description below. We'll take the time to understand where you are, what you've built, and whether the way that we think about capital and income makes sense for your situation. And if you just want to learn more, make sure you subscribe to this channel because we publish content every week on how to think about capital, income, structure, and building wealth that actually lasts. I'll see you on the next video.